Hey, welcome back to J&J Dynasty. Just wanted to go over this. Well, I could just start like that, couldn't I? I just wanted to go over some final draft results that I did. I checked in with about 20, well, it's actually 21 Dynasty leagues, standard Dynasty PPR, one quarterback Dynasty leagues. So I just wanted to share the results here after all of the end of March or end of May, the June, July, and August drafts that have gone on so far. So I think that most of the drafts are pretty much over, but this will give you an idea of value of where you may have drafted your guys, or if you have a guy coming up or a draft coming up, if it's a starter league, the values that people were placing on the rookies in the draft. So I even every different draft is broken down so you can see each one of them. A couple things are on there that are probably a little bit different than maybe I should have done, but if you see a 60 in the column for the draft position, that either means that they were drafted, not, or that either means they're not drafted or they were drafted after pick number 60. So that doesn't mean that they always weren't drafted, but if they were drafted after 60, I just wasn't going to keep track of it because that's, you know, after the fifth round. So at that point, it doesn't really matter what number you put in there. So I just didn't want people to just slide off and have zeros because number one is Brees Hall, so you're playing golf. So I can't put a zero in there. So I had to put a number in there. So I just chose 60 to make it even, and that's how it goes. So if they weren't in there. A couple other things on the very last slide, I put in a couple of extra guys who are not. I did not keep track of the whole way because when I started, I did like 36 guys, and off the first two drafts or whatever, I could see that the same guys were being drafted in May, and so I just did 36 because I figured, the way it always works, there's a half a dozen guys who are drafted in the second and third rounds, veterans who got cut that maybe should not have gotten cut. So I figured, if I go to 36, that gives me over 3 rounds, another six guys. You're looking at 412, whatever, basically through your fourth round. So after that, it really doesn't matter where you get it, grab a guy. But I just wanted to, check and make sure I was getting the guys in the higher rounds with the equivalent value. So we can get into this thing, and we'll just start it off here, I guess. Let's get back into the slideshow. So these are the real draft results from the 2022 rookie draft from MFL Dynasty Leagues. So these are actual picks, actual draft positions, right? So there we go. So as you can see, in all 21 drafts, we have Brees Hall going in every one of them, right? So now the farthest one left over there, that's just 1 through 12. So that's the first round. The second level, I made it a slight different color. That's what their average is, okay? So between the blue lines right there, right? Between the blue lines, that's the total number of draft slots that they were in there, right? So if they were drafted 7th overall, there was number 7, right? So you got a 7 that carried all the way over to that number. So I took that number divided by the 21, which gives us the number way over to the right there. And as you can see, it follows along pretty well. At 6, you got 6.52, and at 7, you get 6.67, at 8, 6.76. So, and then number 9 is 9.9. So that kind of shows you what the average value of those drafts are. And you got to remember that not all of those drafts were 100% rookies that came down through there, but those are the average draft numbers in those drafts, okay? I know that I had a draft where the Rams defense was drafted at number 12. And who was the other guy? There was another guy. Somebody terrible was drafted in the first round, was a veteran. But at any rate, so that's what those are. Those are the averages throughout all the drafts. So it's not going to be one for one, and it's not all rookies. So you have to remember that when you're taking a look at these numbers. So, but as you look at it, on the screen there from left to right. So over the first one over there would have been those way over there are the May ones, and the ones right up here, right next to the blue lines, those are the end of July / August drafts. So you can also notice, as you can see, the first, God, what is it here? About 10 or so drafts. Well, actually, the first, was that 8 drafts, whatever. 1 through 4 were exactly the same. Then after that, you started seeing some deviation, and Walker, Walker and London, that kind of stuff. So if you want to see the highs and lows, you can see the highest that they were drafted and the lowest that they were drafted. I mean, if you look at Dotson at the bottom there, recently he was drafted at 8 and he went at 9 a couple times, but very early he was drafted at 16, so he's had his ups and downs based off of news, and that's kind of why I wanted to plot this, so that it gives you some data points. I mean, like Sky Moore forever was either at 9 or 10, and he didn't deviate much at all, right? So, I mean, there's a couple outliers in there at 13, but that's that. I mean, James Cook, he started off 6, 7, or 8 virtually all the time, but he has a couple outliers in there in double digits, right? So, but that gives you an idea of where they were. Now, the thing that is also in here is way over here, right? So 34, 36, and 35. Those are the numbers on Fan Pro, okay? So, well, let's see here. 35, that's August. 36, that would be July, and 34 would be the June value on Fan Pros on the Dynasty Fantasy Trade Chart value. So that I put those on there also just to see if there was a difference between the trade value chart on Fan Pros and how people were actually drafting them, right? So looking for value versus the Fan Pros chart versus the actual draft positions, right? And to see how far down as far as rookies they're sliding as far as that goes. So that's your round one pretty much. Not pretty much, that is your round one. So with that, hopefully I've given you enough time. The thing that I noticed is that Jameson Williams slid down pretty much here at the end. And he didn't slide hard, but Cook and Olave kind of jumped him barely with how high they were being drafted. I mean, a lot of people were saying that Olave was going to be number 8, and it's surprising that Williams wound up being number 8. And obviously that's because of an injury, and he's not going to be able to play much this year, right? So that's why those numbers came in here. Sky Moore was very consistent, and you can see Christian Watson, because of the injury news and not good news out of the camps here in the last couple of weeks, he's getting a lot of 13s, 12s, and 14s, which slid him back because he was pretty solidly in at 10, 9s, and 10s early in the year, right? So then, George Pickens, he picked it up here at the end. So, I mean, he's always been right around 12, and Dotson also picked it up with some 9s and some 8s here early, or in the middle of the month of July. So that gives you the numbers. But I'd like to see that way over there is that 12.4 and pick 12, they kind of correlate. So as far as round one goes, you can see that mostly the rookies have been drafted, so the numbers are pretty darn close. Okay? And then you can see, way over here, right there, right? How those numbers are fluctuating. And you can see that Pickens is probably the worst value according to the draft position. That's followed closely by probably Cook at 27. And Cook actually went down. He went from 29 to 27 to 27, just like Pickens went from 24 to 19, right? Almost every rookie has gone down, I believe, or held their value. So, I mean, and that's just the way it goes after the draft. Rookies usually slide a little bit. just because they're hyped when they get drafted, and then reality sets in. So I think that's most of it. So we can probably move on from here. So this is where round 2 comes in. And as you can see, by the time you get down to bottom, the number 24 over there, right? It's 26.7 is what the average draft position is for Wan'Dale Robinson. So now you got to remember that that's average of 3.2, almost 3.3, because those are rounds. So this is the complete second round in their average values. And if you look way over here, way up there, you can see is it Tyler Algier at 6, 7, and 8. So he's gone down in value, but yet everybody's drafting him early in the second round on average. So that just shows you where the Fan Pros chart is off a little bit. And I think it's pretty funny that, over here also, if you look at Trey McBride, he's worth 23 points supposedly, but he's being drafted at 23. And he's much higher than everybody around him as far as the value. So just like with everything else, any trade calculator you use, keep trade cut, fantasy, the Dynasty 101 trade calculator, if you have your own level, everybody thinks and values players differently. I mean, there's no reason that Trey McBride should be at 23. He's going to be behind Zach Ertz for 2 years. There's too many mouths to feed already in Arizona as far as throwing the ball. So, I mean, you got D-Hop, you got Hollywood, you got Robinson, you got A.J. Green, and then you got Zach Ertz. And then after that, you have McBride. So why is he valued at 23? And Zach Ertz is going to be there for 2 years. He signed a 2-year contract. So I don't know how they're planning on doing this. They're not going to be running, 2 tight end formations. They're going to be 3 and 4 wide receivers most of the time. So if anybody's on the field, it's going to be Zach Ertz. So I just don't understand why Trey McBride is going so high or is valued so much on Fan Pros. That's just my issue with how the trade value charts go. But like I said, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. You have to have your own thought process. Think for yourself. Don't just regurgitate what other people say. So I thought it was pretty interesting that some guys really jumped up. I mean, if you look at Zamir White in the first couple drafts, he was at 14 and 15, so he slid down to 18 all the way. David Bell, in the first 3 drafts, 17, 19, and 16, and he wound up at 17. So holding pretty steady. I mean, Spiller, you can see he took, he's gone from being drafted later to being drafted really early and back, and he winds up settling at 15. You can see that 17 or 15 or 19 and 17, and then he went down to the 12, 2-1, 2-2, kind of spots for quite a while, and then he slid back a little bit for a while, and then, he kind of leveled off at the 14, 15. Zamir White's been kind of all over the board. So, I mean, you can see 14s, 15s to start with, and then he's got in there 26s, several of them. So, I mean, that's the third round. He's not even going all the time in the second round. Same thing with Brian Robinson. He's kind of been all over the board. I mean, I thought he had a really high one. Yeah, well, he started off at 15, really high because of the hype. And he's, been being drafted in the 20s typically. And that's what it proves out, right at 20. So Alec Pierce has been kind of all over the board also. And so those are kind of my things. And you can actually see how Jalen Tolbert has climbed. I mean, he started off at in the 20s, even the high 20s, but then he, he's been hitting some teens here recently, and barely into the 20s as we go. So that happens with the news and how guys are rolling. And if we would be tracking this into August with the news with Wan'Dale Robinson, being a star and looking like a star, his numbers would be sliding down also. So if you got Wan'Dale Robinson in the third round, you did a good job. You got a nice pick there. So once again, just to clarify, the very first row over there, that's just 1 through 12. The second row there is their draft position based off of between the blue lines here. And these numbers, that number should add up to all of these, right? So I just did the sum function in Excel. And then once again, right here, these three numbers, those are just the fan pro numbers. So this should give you everything you need to know. And you can always pause the video and take a look at it, right? And be able to check out what you want. So don't forget that. All right, let's get on to the last round 3. And what I found very interesting, and you can actually see this here. So you can see right in here, a lot of these bottom guys, they have 60s, right? Remember, those are not, that does not mean that they, that does not mean that they didn't get drafted necessarily, but they got at least drafted after pick 60. So that's what that means. All right. And then I just put on the very bottom here that Dobbs, or Romeo Dobbs, I guess is what he wants to be called, not Dobbs, Dobbs. Dulcich, the tight end for Denver, Snoop Connor, and Ford. Those guys were guys that were jumping in and being drafted somewhat regularly the last month and a half, right? Because they didn't make the first initial cut usually. So I just wanted to put that note on there so that if in case that you thought that, and I kind of put them in the order which I feel like that they were popping up and I was bypassing them on the list, right? Now, Romeo had popped into the second round a couple times here based off of the news out of Green Bay so far. So just wanted to let you know that, that he has become a little bit more significant than the other guys. So just wanted to tell you that. Ooh, did I cut some guys off here? Ooh, look at that. I did. So, okay, get on me again. There. I don't know that you necessarily need to see me, but let me shrink myself down. See a little bit more of me, maybe. All right. So this is what we have for the third round, and if you look all the way down here, number 37, Kyron Williams, all the way out at 55.8 because he racked up so many 60s after his foot injury. So you can see where he was being drafted, he got hurt, and then he wasn't being drafted really anymore, except by people that wanted him and put him on the IR, right? So that's pretty much the way that goes. And you can see how the Fantasy Pros values over here have changed, right? So you're not looking in the 20s anymore. You're all the way down in the 1s and 2s and 3s. So these are the guys. And I mean, I think it's pretty funny. Where is it? Jelani Woods in the last draft, he went 15th overall. Look at where he was at before that. 4 drafts before that, he was at 60. Then he was at the 30s for 3, and he was 60s before that. The very last draft, somebody drafted him at 15. Has to be a Rams fan or a family member. I don't know. That's a huge reach. I mean, you're grabbing a guy at least 15 picks way too early. If you'd have got him at 31 or 32, that would have been early, right? So at any rate, this is why you do this, so you don't make those kind of mistakes. You want to get the most value you can for your guy. Even if you think that he's going to be worth more, if you can wait a half a round to a round or a round and a half and move up 1 pick or move back to get the guy that you want, this is the reason why I put this information out here. So that's kind of the story for the draft for 2022, the rookies. So even in your startup leagues, if you look, and so now you got a pretty good idea of how guys are being drafted and how guys are being valued. At least you have the top, say 37 plus 4 is what, top 40 guys, right? And you have at least a list of where they're coming in. So, just got to remember Romeo Dobbs is probably now being drafted at the end of the second, early third round because of the news out of Green Bay. Dulcich, I mean, he's popped up in the third round sometimes, but a lot of times in the fourth round. Snoop was getting drafted third I think twice in the fourth round, mostly maybe fifth round. Same thing with Ford, mostly fourth round. Wow, talking too damn much. Got the spot on this side, and I can't get drinking on this side. I don't know what the deal is. But at any rate, so this should help you be able to at least grab guys in other drafts, not just dynasty drafts, be able to, as far as where guys are going to go or which order that they're going to go for the most part. Now, this is an average of over 20 drafts, so that gives some weight. I don't know if it's 100%. It's not going to be 100% perfect, obviously, because I just showed you Jelani Woods jumped all the way up to 15. But I know that when I was doing my drafts, when I had the current data and when it was updated, I was like 3 picks usually from where a guy was. Guys usually didn't get drafted much more than 3 picks from where I had them slotted on my updated draft list. So this is something I would maybe recommend for people to do. Also, you can save teams. I literally have bookmarks for the drafts, and when I copied them, and so I just have to go back to them every year, and I can do the exact same thing. It's really nice when you're in, say, June, and instead of thinking you know where a guy's going, you don't. I mean, if you look at, I just did a Fan Pros Dynasty draft, right? Last week, actually. Kenny Pickett went at 112, supposedly in a rookie dynasty draft. Where's Kenny Pickett going? He's going pick 34. 27th overall in rookies. How accurate is that draft? It's not. Same thing, Malik Willis, who I think went in the second round. That's not accurate. It's not a good draft. I mean, when you go to these sites like Keep Trade Cut and people don't care what they put in, if half of them don't care, you're getting garbage data. These are the real numbers for real drafts that people really paid for and they really care about because they're going to have these guys. So that's what I would say about this. It should be, I mean, it should be helpful for most of the year as far as how players are being rated. So if you want to make a trade for rookie guys, this should give you a tier breakdown, right? Because I know even when I was grabbing the trade value dynasty on the trade chart, that's where I was hunting and pecking sometimes to find the right guys because they didn't go in order as far as how they came down through the draft. So just remember that, and that's the information for today. So hopefully you're able to pause and see all the information that you wanted, check out some of the guys that you wanted. I mean, on your TV, hopefully I made it big enough so that you can see and read all the information and go from there. But that's everything here from J&J. Until next time, have a great day.